Minerals, energy and agriculture, now more than ever, are vital to Australia's clean energy future, economic growth and prosperity. Since 2016, Geoscience Australia has applied science and technology in new ways through the Exploring for the Future program. By gathering, analysing and interpreting data at unprecedented scale and detail, we're building a national picture of Australia's geology and resource potential. So, how do we know where to look for potential minerals, energy and groundwater buried deep underground? By analysing rock samples and water percolating up from below, measuring signals from earthquakes and lightning strikes, surveying and mapping with aircraft and seismic trucks. We are looking, listening, monitoring and recording what the Earth is telling us. We look across the country and image hundreds of metres below the surface to create a picture of what lies below our feet, resulting in a new generation of maps and data. Each set of data we acquire is valuable in itself, but when we overlay the data sets together in a way no one has done before, we start to see the full picture and gain a greater understanding of where we can make new discoveries. Australia has become a world leader in the science and innovation behind resource exploration. We're placing data directly into the hands of the people who need it. Governments and local decision makers, investors, explorers and regional communities, supporting informed decisions that make a real difference to all Australians. We thank the people and communities who collaborate with us to ensure the success of our program. Together, our work is supporting the transition to a sustainable, clean energy future, building tomorrow's industries and stimulating regional economies to ensure the prosperity of future generations.
Welcome to the 2024 Exploring for the Future program showcase. My name is Steve Hill and I'm Geoscience Australia's Chief Scientist. I'll be moderating this first plenary session and I'd like to begin with an acknowledgement of country video.
Geoscience Australia acknowledges the traditional owners and custodians of country throughout Australia and acknowledges their continuing connection to land, waters and community.
We pay our respects
to the people, the cultures and elders, past and present.
At Geoscience Australia, we acknowledge that our mission
to be the trusted source of Earth sciences information
is preceded by tens of thousands of years of knowledge
gained by generations of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders.
I want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of that wisdom
and of the lands, waters and skies
where we work, live and learn.
Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islanders are Australia's original mappers, miners and navigators.
This is the heart of our work.
And we have so much to learn from their many thousands of years of related knowledge.
Since 2016, our $225 million Exploring for the Future program has been gathering, analysing and providing pre-competitive geoscience data, information and tools to help inform decision-making by government, community and industry on the sustainable development of Australia. We haven't done it alone. We acknowledge the ongoing support and work of all of the partners, collaborators and communities who have helped us deliver the Exploring for the Future program, many of whom are joining us today. This year's final showcase is packed with over 30 talks and a panel discussion spread over 4 days, highlighting transformational datasets, improved mineral, energy and groundwater resource assessments, new decision support tools and new approaches to how we have shared these insights and knowledge. Now, we have a message from the Hon Madeleine King MP, Minister for Resources and Minister for Northern Australia.
Hello everyone. I'd like to start today by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which I'm speaking from here in Canberra, the Ngunnawal and Ngambri people, and pay my respects to their elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to acknowledge First Nations peoples right around Australia and recognise, as is Geoscience Australia's tradition, that Australia's First Nations peoples are the first mappers, miners and navigators of this country. Understanding our Earth's surface and what is underneath reduces risk to industry and accelerates discoveries. It also empowers regional and Indigenous communities, governments and industry to make informed decisions on the sustainable management of our mineral, energy and groundwater resources. For 8 years, the Exploring for the Future program has used cutting-edge techniques to deliver world-leading information about our resources in underexplored areas of Australia. Today, I'm delighted to launch the Exploring for the Future program, an overview of Australia's transformational geoscience program. As you will see in this report and from the showcase over the next 4 days, the program has been a huge success. We know from a study by Deloitte Access Economics that pre-competitive geoscience supported $76 billion of added value to our economy and 80,000 full-time jobs in 2022 alone. The program has stimulated an unprecedented scale of exploration activity right across the country. 6 companies exploring in new regions identified by the program have recently reported mineral discoveries of rare earth elements, copper and gold, which are likely to grow with further drilling. The program has also helped build partnerships and projects with First Nations peoples and helped secure water resources for regional and remote communities in the Northern Territory and New South Wales. These are just a few of the positive outcomes in the last 8 years. There have been many more, which you'll hear about over the coming days. Now, more than ever, we need to know what we are made of. And publicly accessible geoscience gives us the tools to make that search easier. That's why we are putting Australia's resources industry at the heart of government policy. Building on the success of the Exploring for the Future program, we have committed more than $3 billion over the next 35 years for the Resourcing Australia's Prosperity program. This is the biggest investment in public geoscience ever and will ensure we can draw the map for our resources companies to find the minerals we all need to drive our economy. Geoscience Australia will comprehensively map Australia's natural resources, including critical minerals and groundwater. This will ensure Australia's resources sector continues to underpin our economy and future sovereign capability in the years and decades to come. I understand that planning is well underway with consultation across government, industry, academia and communities planned for coming months. I look forward to releasing Geoscience Australia's 10-year roadmap for the initiative early next year. Thank you so much for your attention and please enjoy the next 4 days of the showcase.
It really is important having Minister King's enthusiastic support, and we thank her for her knowledge, passion and enthusiasm here. Next, we're going to hear from Dr James Johnson, Geoscience Australia's Chief Executive Officer. James joined Geoscience Australia in 2006 and has been the CEO since 2017. James has a scientific background as a geologist with nearly 4 decades of professional experience in mining and mineral exploration and leading diverse geoscience teams and national programs that have attracted exploration investment to Australia. James has a Bachelor of Science from the University of Sydney and a PhD from the Australian National University. His vision for Geoscience Australia is one of deploying integrative geoscience for the economic, social and environmental benefit of Australians.
Thanks, Steve. I would echo Steve's thanks to the Minister. It's fantastic having such a staunch advocate and supporter of our work at Geoscience Australia, the pre-competitive geoscience. Hi everyone, and welcome to the final Exploring for the Future program showcase. For those who may not be familiar with our work, our purpose at Geoscience Australia is to be the trusted advisor on earth sciences. As Minister King said, A key part of our role is to deliver public geoscience, or what we call precompetitive geoscience, freely and for the public good, providing an evidence base for decision making by government, communities and industry. Over the last 8 years, the Exploring for the Future program has been our flagship precompetitive geoscience program. I'm immensely proud of the success it's achieved. It was originally devised in 2016 to address 3 challenges for Australia: a decline in our share of global resource exploration expenditure, a drive to support energy security and the net zero transition, and the need to manage our groundwater resources sustainably. As you'll see over the next 4 days, it has certainly delivered on all of these outcomes. Our precompetitive geoscience, combined with that produced by state and territory geological surveys, in many cases is world-leading. For explorers, the Exploring for the Future program has narrowed the search area and lowered the technical risks of resource exploration, particularly in underexplored regions. Based on direct feedback from companies, we know the program has stimulated exploration activities by over 70 companies across almost 600 tenements, covering almost 490,000 square kilometres. And as the Minister said, some of these companies are already reporting promising early exploration results, confirming the usefulness of our outputs. In the search for rare earth elements, our work has led to the announcement of 4 resources. Our Oz AEM survey helped OD6 Metals to define clay-hosted rare earth targets and explore more effectively at the Splinter Rock project in the Esperance region of WA. Our levelled national radiometric data helped Dreadnought Resources to discover the Yin carbonatite and open a new rare earths province in the Gascoyne region in WA. Our North Australia Geochemical Survey helped transition minerals to pivot to rare earth exploration in the Barkly region of the Northern Territory. And most recently, our reanalysis of legacy stream sediments helped DevEx Resources discover a clay-hosted deposit in northeast Queensland. The range of techniques, mineral systems and geographic spread of these discoveries highlights that there's no silver bullet, and it does support the multidisciplinary nature and national reach of the Exploring for the Future program. For investors, the program has provided information on resource opportunities, increasing Australia's attractiveness as an investment destination. From 1993 through to 2015, Australia's share of global mineral exploration expenditure declined from a high of 23% to a low of 8%, reflecting industry's view that all the big finds in Australia had already been made. Since the commencement of our program, we've seen that trend reversed, with Australia's share rising to 18% of global expenditure in 2023, capturing 26% of world-class discoveries. Furthermore, our Economic Fairways Mapper tool, developed with Monash University, has allowed us to spatially identify opportunities for lower carbon energy generation to support the industry's transition to net zero and green metal manufacturing, for example, green steel. For governments, the Exploring for the Future program has informed resource and land management decisions, including groundwater management and development. For example, in a collaboration with the New South Wales Government, potential new sources of groundwater have been identified for community water supply in the township of Wilcannia. Something that I'm personally proud of is the deepened relationships that we've formed with First Nations groups. One example is our collaboration with the Dugalanji Aboriginal Corporation and the Lake Eyre Basin Ranger Group. Through meaningful engagement and consultation, soil science and groundwater sampling monitoring were identified as key areas that we could lend support. Working together, we improved and expanded the Lake Eyre Basin Ranger's capabilities in these areas. This included co-designing a guide for rangers for collection of data on soils and landscapes, and training rangers in water sampling from bores and conducting basic analyses in the field. Ranger Program Management has told us that this work has increased their capability and will assist their rangers to care for country and provide them with services that they can offer to others. I want to close by thanking you all for your continued interest in our work. As the nation's trusted source of information on Australia's earth sciences, We exist to empower decision making by you, our stakeholders across government, communities and industry. I hope you enjoy the showcase.
Thank you, James. I'm delighted now to introduce Dr Andrew Heap, Chief of the Minerals, Energy and Groundwater Division, who has led the Exploring for the Future program since its inception in 2016. Andrew has 24 years of professional experience in geoscience research as a senior leader in Geoscience Australia. Andrew graduated with first-class honours in geography with a Bachelor of Science, MSc from the University of Auckland in 1996 and completed his PhD in Earth Sciences at James Cook University in 2000. I'll hand to Andrew now, but please add any questions you have for Andrew in the chat, as there'll be some time for Q&A afterwards. Thank you, Andrew.
Thanks for that kind introduction, Steve. Hello everyone. As Steve said, I'm Andrew Heap. As the Chief of the Minerals, Energy and Groundwater Division at Geoscience Australia, it's my great pleasure to also welcome you to the final showcase of the Exploring for the Future program. Today, I want to expand on the comments made by Minister King and our CEO, James Johnson. My aim today is to provide an overview of the last 8 years of the Exploring for the Future program and consider the legacy of what I think has been a truly remarkable program, and definitely one of our most successful. Before I get to that, I want to begin by reflecting on the context for the program. In many ways, some key domestic and global events of 2016 are still challenges we face today, though many have grown in significance. In 2016, the cost of living challenge started to gain prominence, represented in the debate through reference to people's breakfast choices. There were concerns about the future of the Australian economy, as the September 2016 quarter reported the worst fall in GDP since the global financial crisis. Geopolitical tensions and trade reorganisation were building, signalled by Brexit and a trend towards nationalism. In April 2016, the Paris Agreement on climate change was signed. This set the path for the global transition to net zero and a surge in demand for energy transition minerals and low carbon energy. In Australia, these global events were set in the context of an unusually wet winter and spring, followed by a 3-year drought, placing a strain on Australia's precious water resources. It is with this backdrop that the genesis for the Exploring for the Future program occurred, with the aim to help address the 3 challenges just outlined by James in his talk. So let me elaborate a little more. Australia's resources sector has long been a backbone of the Australian economy. In 2016, the sector contributed to 6% of our GDP. In 2024, it accounts for 13%. The sector supports about 300,000 jobs and is responsible for 2/3 of Australia's total merchandise exports. As we look to the future, realising our net zero emission goals by 2050 presents a huge opportunity for the sector. The International Energy Agency estimates that by 2030, the world will need 41 new nickel mines, 30 new lithium mines, 11 new cobalt mines, and over 100 new hydrogen plants. And the forecasts for 2050 are even larger. Getting to net zero will rely on maintaining a pipeline of new resource projects, which relies on new discoveries based on exploration. But exploration is a very risky business, especially in new regions or for new commodities. In terms of minerals, when we started the Exploring for the Future program in mid-2016, that pipeline was at risk. Australia's share of global mineral exploration expenditure had been declining from a record high of 23% in 1993 to an all-time low of 8% in 2015. In real terms, Australia's expenditure on minerals and energy resources was the lowest it had been in a decade. Industry said that they were leaving us, as they thought the exposed geology across the surface of Australia had been explored and the search space was all but exhausted. The challenge, defined through the Uncover initiative, was to unlock the exploration frontier at depth, or the 80% or so of Australia's land mass where prospective geology is beneath layers of sediments and younger rocks. Below the surface is also where Australia's precious groundwater resources are. As the driest inhabited continent on Earth, Australia is highly reliant on groundwater for town supply and agriculture. In Australia, groundwater comprises about 30% of our national water consumption and is the only reliable, cost-effective source of water for communities and industries across 60% of our landmass. Importantly, about 38% of mine development relies exclusively on groundwater. According to the Australian Bureau of Statistics, agriculture is the biggest user of water in Australia, with groundwater supporting 29% of irrigation. A key objective of Australia's National Water Initiative is to return all systems to environmentally sustainable levels of extraction. A 2022 study by the National Centre for Groundwater Research and Training found setting these limits is currently the greatest challenge facing groundwater managers in Australia. This challenge is exacerbated by climate change, which is placing additional stress on our groundwater resources. Given Australia has some of the largest groundwater flow systems in the world, with many hydrogeological units crossing state and territory boundaries, decisions regarding the sustainable management of the total resource need to be based on robust cross-jurisdictional information. However, when we began the Exploring for the Future program, our most recent national-scale map of hydrogeological units was from 1987 and was due for significant revision and updating. In this context, the federal government invested $225 million over 8 years into the Exploring for the Future program, led by Geoscience Australia, to provide national-scale geological data and information to inform decisions by industry, government and the community on the development of Australia's mineral, energy and groundwater resources. The first 4 years were focused on Northern Australia, and then the program was expanded nationally. Our focus was primarily on geoscience data collection and analysis, to enhance our understanding of Australia's geology and thereby the national resource potential. This map shows the transformational scale of our data collection and analysis. Whenever I look at this map, I'm in awe of what we've achieved. I'm also grateful for the support of our research partners, especially our state and territory counterparts and colleagues in academia, without whom this national scale data collection would not have been possible. Together, we collected hundreds of thousands of line kilometres of airborne geophysics, measured the geophysical response at thousands of stations, analysed the chemical composition of tens of thousands of rock, soil and water samples, analysed over 124 million mineral grains and drilled tens of kilometres of rock. We released over 1,000 new data sets and publications and added more than 9.6 million data points to our national data holdings. This was truly an immense undertaking, and I'm proud to say that it is the envy of the world, to the extent that other countries are now looking to emulate what we achieved. I now want to highlight these achievements in more detail under each of the 4 themes of the program. First, I want to highlight some of our stakeholder engagement and data collection activities. Our national scale data collection was underpinned by our deliberate focus on community consultation. Our data collection activities span 56% of Australia, covering more than 120,000 individual land parcels and requiring direct consultation with over 1,000 unique stakeholders. Later today, as part of the showcase, my colleague Margaret Sweeney will talk more about how we went about this and the positive effects our approach had on realising the objectives of the program. Importantly, our engagement activities did not stop at consultation with directly affected stakeholders. We also proactively engaged with the wider community by participating in community meetings and agricultural shows with our mobile laboratory to demonstrate what we were doing and why it's needed, including how our data and information might be useful for local communities. We also visited schools to give hands-on demonstrations to students about the work we do and explain how our understanding the geology can tell us so much about the world, looking to inspire a new generation of geoscientists. And, as James said in his presentation, we actively sought to deepen our engagement with First Nations groups. We were keen to build relationships and learn how earth science knowledge could be used to support First Nations people's priorities for economic and environmental self-determination. In response to their requests, we subsequently established partnerships with 3 groups: the Jungan people of North East Queensland, the Anandiliakwa Land Council on Groot Island in the Northern Territory, and the Dugalanji Aboriginal Corporation working with the Lake Eyre Basin Rangers in southwest Queensland. Through these partnerships, we co-designed projects and shared our understanding and capabilities with each other. Here is an example of the use of our radiometric data, which measures naturally occurring concentrations of potassium, thorium and uranium to map soil properties. The First Nations groups used this data in combination with their own knowledge, to assess the health of their country and make informed choices about land management. You can find out more details in Meredith Orr's presentation later today. We refer to our work as precompetitive geoscience, as our data and information is provided to everyone as a public good. It is provided publicly to help inform decision making on the sustainable development of Australia's natural resources by all stakeholders. For industry, it also lowers the risk of resource exploration by focusing companies to the most important and prospective areas. It's important to remember that precompetitive geoscience comes before industry investment, not instead of it. The Exploring for the Future program achieved a step change in our data management and delivery. Nearly all of our science products are now accessible through our online data discovery portal. Here you can explore and access literally hundreds of geological, geochemical and geophysical datasets, maps and decision support tools in both 2D and 3D. Later today, my colleague Mark Webster will discuss the portal and the data and information it contains in more detail. We know that the insights we gain from analysing the data we collect, compile, analyse and deliver is also useful to non-geoscientists. In response, we developed GeoInsight, a pilot online platform providing regional scale summaries of our current knowledge of minerals, energy and groundwater resources across Australia, specifically for non-geoscience experts. I'm very proud of GeoInsight. It was the first data and information delivery system to be co-designed with non-geoscientists and is being released today. I strongly encourage you to stay online to hear more from Catherine Waltenberg about this wonderful product and new direction for Geoscience Australia. The second theme I want to talk about is the progress we have made on advancing Australia's national data coverages. As I mentioned before, the Exploring for the Future program has been key to expand Australia's national geoscience data coverages. Here is a snapshot of over 40 datasets that were augmented or extended by the program, and which characterise Australia's land surface, sedimentary basins, the crust and the lithospheric mantle, from outcrop at the surface to depths of up to a few hundred kilometres. Other countries seek to emulate what we have done, but we are not resting on our laurels. Through the Exploring for the Future program, we maintained our global leadership by beginning to assemble a raft of new geochemical, geophysical and geological datasets. We targeted our data collection to meet the needs of exploration and natural resource management, but the datasets have broader applications in areas such as community safety and infrastructure planning. To unlock the uncover search space, much of our data collection focused on imaging the subsurface. We initiated the AusAEM 20 km spaced airborne electromagnetic survey, which now covers 70% of the mainland. We doubled the deep-looking AusLAMP magnetotellurics coverage, which now spans over 50% of Australia. We started one of the world's largest passive seismic surveys, simultaneously deploying stations spaced 200 kilometres apart. And we expanded our isotopic mapping program into 3 new isotopic systems. Having said that, the rise in importance of critical minerals, many of which have not previously been explored for, meant that the land surface re-emerged as an exploration frontier. We therefore reinvested in mapping surface chemistry and mineralogy to support discovery of these new critical minerals. Each of these geophysical and geochemical endeavours was complemented by continued research and development, allowing us to map the properties of the Earth with greater fidelity and certainty than ever before. I'm convinced the datasets we have been collecting will be one of the most enduring legacies of the Exploring for the Future program. The datasets will be built upon as we seek to establish national scale and higher resolution data coverage, and will be reinterpreted for many, many years. Each dataset could be the focus of a dedicated talk. However, I'll just highlight one for now. As I mentioned earlier, when we started the Exploring for the Future program, we only had the national map of surface geology, but our aim was to unlock the undercover search space. With this objective in mind, we set out to systematically map the subsurface geology across Australia using our geophysical datasets, drill holes and relevant state and territory datasets. Fast forward 8 years, and it is my great pleasure to release today the world's first layered geology map of a continent. It reveals the geology beneath sediments and rocks laid down over successive geological eras. The scale of the undertaking to produce the layered geology map for Australia cannot be understated. About 7,600 individual geological units have been mapped consistently across Australia, resulting in 185,000 polygons across 5 time periods. With our growing coverage of sediment thickness shown here, we will soon be able to know both the lateral distribution of Australia's major rock types and their depths, paving a way forward for a national 3D geological model. Please tune into Guillaume Sanchez, Sebastian Wong and Nadej Rollet's presentations on this world-first solid geology map to find out more. Combining the national data sets in innovative ways brings new possibilities. A notable step change brought about by the Exploring for the Future program has been to take the data sets and combine them to assess the resource potential for specific minerals, energy and groundwater resources across Australia. Each resource assessment we undertook as part of the Exploring for the Future program was a dedicated body of work, and together they are the beginnings of an inventory of Australia's resource potential. For explorers, resource assessments identify new prospective ground to peg or start a joint venture. For communities, they provide information of what is known about the local resources and potential development opportunities compared to elsewhere. And for government, they can inform land use planning such as the placement of conservation zones or locations for targeting industry support. The top 3 maps on the left of the slide show where a particular combination of geological processes occurred to maximise the chance of discovery of certain styles of nickel, copper and rare earth element deposits. This is a style of resource assessment pioneered at Geoscience Australia in 2016, and we continue to improve it by refining input data sets and applying more advanced analytical techniques. The map on the bottom left is our Atlas of Australian mine waste. Together with the state and territory geological surveys, about 80 mine waste sites across Australia are being sampled and analysed for critical minerals occurrences through a collaboration with the University of Queensland. Importantly, and in a major development of our thinking, we have gone beyond mapping geological potential. We now provide tools to identify economic fairways, which provide a first-order estimate of a potential project's economic viability. The map on the right shows the economic fairway for green hydrogen, the one below that for green steel manufacturing, and below that the relative cost of carbon capture and storage. Each assessment is underpinned by specific resource development cost models, but also the distribution of infrastructure, variations in royalty payments and geology. The innovation and utility of this work was recognised by being awarded the Eureka Prize for Sustainability in 2023, which is like the Oscars of Australian science. The last map on this slide shows the distribution of 42 national hydrogeological units, which we have rapidly assessed to update our national hydrogeological knowledge. Now, we are progressively building our understanding of these units by combining and standardising legacy data and information. As you can see, building a unified national inventory of resource potential is quite complex. I want to highlight some of that complexity, which we addressed through the Exploring for the Future program. On the left of this slide are 3 mineral system potential maps. They map the spatial likelihood of different earth processes coalescing to form a copper ore deposit, with more favourable areas shown in red. The top map is our newest model for iron oxide copper gold style mineralisation, which my colleague Ariane Ford will speak to in detail on Thursday. You can see the map has a higher spatial resolution, as it is the first one to incorporate information from the layered geology map I referred to earlier. As we assess different mineral systems, we can start to combine them to map overall copper potential across Australia, and not just the potential of any one system. We still have quite a few systems to assess before a comprehensive picture emerges for any commodity right now, but we have made great strides in developing a robust methodology and applying it to a key commodity type under the Exploring for the Future program. To test the rigour of the national resource potential models, including constraining unknown geology, we completed several regional projects that involve more detailed study, including stratigraphic drilling. This is a map of the regional projects in the second phase of the program, which ran from 2020 to 2024. I'll highlight just 2, starting with the Perdurka Basin, shown in the brown, which spans the Northern Territory, South Australian Queensland border, and then moving to the Upper Darling Barker River floodplain, shown in purple. In the Perdurka Basin, we wanted to know why past exploration for oil and gas had failed. To do this, we reprocessed valuable legacy seismic reflection data and analysed legacy drills. Our analysis showed that there is some potential for undiscovered oil and gas within sediments over 200 million years old. But the basin presents a much greater opportunity to store up to 15 gigatons of carbon dioxide in shallower rocks about 140 million years old. This result indicates that the region could support multiple commercial-scale carbon storage projects injecting about 50 million tonnes of carbon dioxide per annum over a 20-year period. This example shows the value in repurposing datasets to address new challenges, an approach that we will continue to implement into the future. The second example comes from the Upper Darling Barker River floodplain. Here, the town of Wilcannia in central western New South Wales has been severely impacted by recent droughts, and residents were forced to truck in potable water in 2019. Through our airborne electromagnetic data collection and application of ground-based surface magnetic resonance techniques developed in-house, we identified potential for new sources of groundwater for the town, which are shown in blue on this map. Drilling and pumping are being considered to test these findings and possibly drought-proof Wilcannia. Given the Murray-Darling Basin is one of Australia's best-studied waterways, the identification of possible significant new water resources near Wilcannia highlights just how little we know about Australia's precious groundwater systems. I encourage you to listen to Sarah Buckerfield and KP Tan's presentations about this fascinating work. I hope this overview has given you a sense of the important work we have done and the amazing scientific outputs that have come out of the Exploring for the Future program. In the remaining time, I want to loop back to some of the challenges I outlined at the beginning and reflect on some of the impacts of the program thus far. Over the course of the program, we have tracked industry use of our outputs through ASX releases and by contacting companies to learn how they have used our data and information. This tracking reveals the Exploring for the Future program contributed directly to more than 70 companies to explore across almost 600 new tenements spanning approximately 490,000 square kilometres. That's an area more than double the size of Victoria. From the colours on the map, you can see that many of the explorers are targeting elements on Australia's critical minerals and strategic materials lists. The map singles out rare earth element explorers, and in his presentation before me, James Johnson highlighted the 4 rare earth element discoveries that have arisen so far from this work. Our work also supported a wave of natural hydrogen exploration, as well as the search for gas in Queensland and the Northern Territory. I think it's important to note that most of these new tenements occur in underexplored frontier regions. The Tennant Creek to Mount Isa region is a prime example of where the concurrence of new data, resource assessments, and deep dive projects has unlocked a new exploration search space. Much of the mineral exploration in the region is by junior companies, some of which have established joint ventures with majors. They are in many ways the engine room of Australia's exploration sector, historically accounting for 73% of resource discoveries. While this result is excellent in and of itself, we should compare this level of activity in a global context. Returning to the graph I showed at the beginning of my talk, I can reveal that over the life of the Exploring for the Future program, Australia's share of global exploration expenditure has risen from 8% in 2015 to 18% in 2020 and has since stabilised. From these data, at face value, it appears that over the last 8 years there has been a change in the perception by industry that there are few exploration opportunities in Australia. A recovery of exploration activity is great, but how effective is it? To answer this question, we teamed up with Minex Consulting to look at Australia's share of world-class mineral discoveries, those worth over $200 million US, as they account for the majority of value creation. Since 2017, globally there have been 41 world-class discoveries, 10 of which were in Australia. This level of performance is supported by programs like Exploring for the Future, as 7 of the 10 discoveries were supported by precompetitive geoscience. Without this information, these discoveries would have been significantly delayed or not have happened at all. But information alone does not generate this success. Rather, it's the combination of available world-class information and its use by highly entrepreneurial and world-class Australian explorers. That's the secret to this success. The work and impacts I have shown from the Exploring for the Future program would not have been possible without the inputs of all of our research partners, shown here. And while this showcase marks the end of the Exploring for the Future program, it is not the end of our work to understand the mineral, energy and groundwater resources for Australia. The multi-decadal investment in pre-competitive geoscience through the Resourcing Australia's Prosperity Initiative brings opportunities for further collaborations as we look to the future. To conclude, I've given you a glimpse of what the Exploring for the Future program has achieved over the last 8 years. I hope I've been able to highlight the material difference pre-competitive geoscience makes and has made to resource discovery and improving management of Australia's natural resources. Over the next 4 days, you'll see the immense scale of what we have achieved. We listened to your feedback where there was a desire for more talks, so this year's showcase is our largest. Exploring for the Future's legacy will continue for decades to come. The future for pre-competitive geoscience in Australia is bright. The Australian Government's landmark $3.4 billion investment over 35 years through the Resourcing Australia's Prosperity Initiative allows us to continue to build on the success of the Exploring for the Future program and a future made in Australia. I hope you enjoy this year's showcase and find value in the impressive suite of new data and information that has come out of the program. Thank you for your attention today, and back to you, Steve.
Thank you, Andrew. That was fantastic. A really impressive portfolio of achievement and work there that we're going to be sharing over the next 4 days, and I really look forward to that. It's also the really exciting ongoing legacy of that information and data that we're going to have for the nation into the future. Really good stuff. I also just want to make a little bit of a housekeeping announcement and just say that all of the sessions over the next few days are being recorded and will be made publicly available. It does take a little while for those videos to get just tidied up and processed and put onto YouTube. However, in a shorter time frame, we will also make the slide decks or the slides for the presentations available, and that's all on the Exploring for the Future website. But I'm sure if you do a search as well, some of these things will be popping up. So good news for those that may have missed something, want to see something again, but also to tell your friends that if they missed it, these things are available online. Just a reminder also to please post your questions in the online chat. We'll be drawing on these very soon as we have a discussion with not only Andrew, but we'll also have a panel discussion. Particularly the questions for Andrew would be great. So I'm going to start off actually the questions and discussion with Andrew. So as I said, a fantastic presentation and great to have that information shared with the community, and that's really the objectives of the next few days is to make sure that the nation benefits and to make sure that we're all aware of it. But Andrew, in listening to your presentation, it's remarkable how impactful the program and pre-competitive geoscience can be, and I think this is something I really want to give you the opportunity to expand on, and that is that impact of pre-competitive geoscience. And did that impact surprise you? And was it something you were expecting in the early stages of the EFTF journey?
All right, thank you, Steve. I hope everyone can hear me okay. Well, I guess the first thing I would say is, pre-competitive data is used by stakeholders to make informed decisions. We saw that in the presentations, and we want people to use our information. That's what we want. And the fact that stakeholders made decisions based upon the data and information we collected as part of the program, I guess, didn't surprise me, given that that's borne out by the discoveries that have been supported by the data and the water management decisions that we saw that I alluded to in my presentation. I guess what did surprise me though was the scale and scope of the impact. And I point there to the huge tenement uptake we saw, particularly across Northern Australia, and the scale and the scope of that, which I think reflects the great insights here at Geoscience Australia. Yeah, I'm sorry, I was getting a lot of.
I think that was just a bit of profound feedback there, Andrew. That's all okay.
Yes, thank you. But I think that reflects the great insights of the scientists here at Geoscience Australia about, bringing their expertise and knowledge to the problem or the challenge we faced, and deciding on whereabouts we could make the biggest material difference to our understanding. And then, as I alluded to, and as others have alluded to already, the entrepreneurial nature of our industry and government stakeholders in using that information to make informed decisions. I think it's the first time also we've seen such activity during the course of one of our programs, which is just tremendous. And I think that's sort of a aligning of the stars and the planets in relation to the information that we provided and the great scientific advancements we're making, and also the general environment with which we currently see ourselves, and where, you know, certainly the resources sector is seen as a key to Australia's economic and environmental and social well-being and benefit into the future. So it's great to see the initial results being positive, being so positive in that area, confirming our hypotheses, particularly regarding prospectivity. And so, yeah, there were some surprises, but I guess not unexpected given the level and scale of activity that we did. So thank you, Steve. Yeah.
Terrific. That's really good, Andrew. So just a further question. You ended the presentation by saying the outlook for pre-competitive geoscience in Australia is bright. And I know that from the perspective of a government geoscientist, we always worry about the future and the sustainability and the health of our pre-competitive programs, because I know we are passionate in how we believe they make a big difference. But given the Resourcing Australia's Prosperity Initiative, highlighted by the Minister, James, and yourself, the future does look certain and supported. Can you tell us a bit about that program and how the new RAP initiative, as we are now starting to abbreviate it, will build from the Exploring for the Future program?
Yeah, okay, Steve, thank you. That's a great question. Well, first of all, I'd just like to acknowledge that it's just tremendous to receive such long-term investment in pre-competitive geoscience by the current Australian government. You know, to the theme of this year's showcase, such a long-term investment will be transformational for Geoscience Australia and the pre-competitive geoscience that we do. It will definitely allow us to think long-term and think strategically about what science that we do, given that sort of long-term time frame we've got. And I, want to thank everyone who supported us out there in that opportunity. And now we feel great responsibility to making sure we get it right and really understand our resource potential for the country. I guess the first point I'd like to make is that the new program is not just an extension of Exploring for the Future. It is different. It has elements of the same themes in there, which I'll touch on in a second. But I guess the main thing is it's very different. It's vastly different in terms of scale and scope. There are 4 major themes, some of which we started under Exploring for the Future. For example, the national data sets collection. We will continue to do that, but they'll be augmented under the new program. We will continue to look at our geophysical data sets, but we will add others like geochronology and isotopes and sediments. And so there will be an increase in broader range of data sets that we will try to connect over the national scale to help inform those decision making by our stakeholders. And I guess a key element to that of our thinking on that is, as I said in my talk, about the opening up of the surface as a search space, particularly for rare earths. So we're going back and revisiting some of the work that we've done in that area and seeing what else we can do to really move the needle on that one. There'll be national resource assessments. Again, we're currently going through a process at the moment and deciding how they will play out and what sort of priorities might be. And we will definitely be reaching out very soon to people around to get their input and feedback on that as part of the consultation process over the coming weeks, several months perhaps. But really it's about understanding what the priorities are for the country and making informed choices about what sort of commodities we should go for. We'll still do what we're calling deep dives now, which I guess are akin to those regional programs we did under EFTF. These deep dives will be different though. They'll be a multi-commodity deep dive. So they'll be looking at pretty much every commodity we can possibly find in a geographical area. We're still going through the process of deciding on what those areas will be. I think we've stated as part of the RAP program, we will look at 12 of those across the country. the first two cabs off the rank, so to speak, in that regard, are the continuing some of the work we've done under the Exploring for the Future program in sort of the Birrindudu area and sort of Western Northern Territory, and perhaps going into the WA area, and also the Darling and Delamerian area in Southeast Australia. So we'll continue to look at those areas in a bit more detail, and decide exactly what a multi-commodity resource assessment might look like. And then a key theme of the new program will be an increased focus on delivery and engagement, particularly with First Nations Australians, but definitely moving into a space where we will build on the Geoinsights platform, which we've released today, as a new thread to making sure that the information and knowledge that we provide here can be used by as many stakeholders as possible. So that's really about moving us into that sort of engagement with community. We've learned a lot over the last 8 years. We're not throwing all of that away, as I said. I guess RAP represents the next evolution of our thinking. And as I said, we will be definitely coming out over the next weeks to months to really test our thinking of what we learned over the program, and really testing that with you and other stakeholders about what we should be doing. So it's just amazing to have that unprecedented opportunity to now really understand our resource potential. Thanks.
Yeah, that's great, Andrew. And interesting also to think about how some of what you said also touches on the nation's science and research priorities that were released yesterday by Minister Husic. So particularly the First Nations links. I think that's great. We've got a question for you, Andrew, from an old friend and former employee of Geoscience Australia, Richard Blewett. Richard, I won't try and do it in your voice, but I will read your question. You do start with the very emotive, wow, very impressive, brilliant impact and achievement. Australia is top of the gold medals for the pre-competitive Olympics. Andrew, the sophistication of much of EFTF is inspiring. To me, embedding these lessons, techniques and breakthroughs into everyday exploring workflow is key. This is especially the case with the junior sector, which is much of the country under tenement. How will you continue to translate these lessons into practical, usable activities for explorers? So, yeah, Richard, I mean, I know that he has he has very close connections and interests in that junior sector as well. So, Andrew, would you like to say a few words in response to Richard?
Thanks, Steve, and thanks, Richard, for your question. It's a really good one because, as we've said, that as you've said, the bulk of the exploration in the mineral sector anyway is through those junior companies. Look, I think to answer your question, it's really about understanding what they need and enabling the data and information that we provide. As I said, putting it in ways that go to answers, not just data and information, but providing tailored answers. And I think that's something where we will shift over the next, at least over the next decade. I think we'll get into that space much more deeply. That doesn't say, I'm not trying to say that data and information is not going to be important. It still will be there, but it's about augmenting that data and information and providing answers to people's questions. So I can think of a situation where you might say, just think off the top of my head, where's all the gold in Australia? Well, you can type that in and we can utilize AI and machine learning and a whole bunch of new technologies and techniques, as you've alluded to help actually bring the answer out and then, use our value add as scientists to look at that answer and then present that to our stakeholders. So I think that's, like I said, it's a really exciting time. I think there's some real cool things that we're looking at doing. And those lessons that we learned from EFTF, which was about providing answers, not just data and information, is a thread that will continue. But thanks for the question.
Yeah, excellent. Another one, Andrew, they're out there, they're keen to ask questions and find out some more insight from you. And this one's from Anna Petts in South Australia. Really great to see and about the impact of the EFTF project work to stakeholders. Pre-competitive geoscience can be made up of both new data from acquisition projects and legacy data. Do you have a feel for how much past work/report/data sets and legacy core samples, etc., have contributed? So yeah, it's an interesting question, isn't it, about acquisition versus really, getting the best value out of pre-existing data and samples.
Yeah, thanks, Anna, for that question. Again, it's a very good one. When we design programs, we definitely have a look back at what we've already got, and as I said in my presentation, the legacy of the Exploring for the Future program will live on for decades, and part of that is to go back and see what we've done and use that to help making decisions as we move forward. We're driven by the mantra of where can we make the biggest material difference to our understanding. So where there's lots of useful information already there that may, point to the outcomes that the industry is looking for, or our colleagues in government about particular resource development and regulation, or we're looking, and even the community perhaps want to know about things. We will look at that and make an assessment and go, there's already a lot there, that moving the dial in that area isn't really a government issue right now. It's actually moving it somewhere into another place where there perhaps is less data. So in terms of deciding what we do and where we go, it's hugely important to look at the legacy data. And we don't collect new data unless we really, really have to. I talked about augmenting the data sets, particularly the national data sets, because we see there is a major gap. As I mentioned, the surface is becoming a search space now, and there's a lot. We think that there's a big needle to be moved there about understanding what the full potential of the resources there by getting that better understanding of the surface geology, and so that's how we that's the process we use, is looking at that information we've got already, seeing what the major gaps are, and then trying to fill those gaps where we think it can make a biggest material difference.
Yeah, terrific. Another question, I think this might be the last one, because we also are keen to hear from a panel that we've got assembling at the moment. This one's from Michael Gogol, and Mike wants to know, or says, I really like that water was included in the exploring at Wilcannia. Is water an area that we can expect to see in projects going forward?
The short answer to that, Michael, is yes. Definitely, as we said in the presentation, groundwater particularly is a very important resource for much of particularly remote and rural Australia. And a key theme of the new program, and was a part of Exploring for the Future program, was understanding what our groundwater resources are. One of the key things that we wanted to do as EFTF was get a better understanding of what that resource looked like I'm sorry, I'm getting a lot of feedback. I just wondered if we could turn that down a bit. Yeah, so one of the things we wanted to do as part of the Exploring for the Future program was to understand what our resource potential was for groundwater and update the information. And so we pulled together the first ever national, hydrogeological map, and then looked at where the data we had for that and updated that, and it's been released as part of the program. We'll now build on that as part of the new program going forward, and really understand the hydrogeological characteristics of all of 42 hydrogeological regions across Australia. And that will, I think, for the first time, make a material difference in our understanding of our groundwater resources across Australia. So yes, the short answer is yes, most definitely.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew. And I also acknowledge that you did well with there was that little bit of a reverb feedback in there. Okay, so let's have a look at our panel members that we've got here. Firstly, I'd like to welcome the panel members and say that first up, I'd like to introduce Kim Moore, who's the Acting General Manager of the Mining Branch in our parent department, the Department of Industry, Science and Resources. And Kim has held positions in the Australian Public Service, in climate change, national security, Prime Minister and Cabinet, and education and employment. Kim's got great experience, having worked across several policy areas, including international capacity building, quantitative analysis modelling, service co-design, and major project delivery. Secondly, I'd like to introduce Shane Gaddis. And Shane is the head of the Net Zero Industries Division in the Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water. In this role, Shane has responsibility for government work associated with industrial decarbonisation, hydrogen, CCS, offshore renewables, and new technology deployment. So Shane has also great experience across other parts of government, having actually worked very closely with Australia's former Chief Scientist, Dr Alan Finkel, in his review of the security of the national electricity market. Next on the panel, we have Bronwyn Kamak. Bronwyn is the Director of the Geological Survey of South Australia. Bronwyn has over 30 years experience in the resources industry as both a geologist and in leadership roles. She's worked across the sector, including oil and gas exploration and development, and government and stakeholder engagement. And Bronwyn studied at the University of South Australia and holds a PhD in engineering science from the University of Adelaide. Working with the Geological Survey of South Australia allows Bronwyn to work with experienced and highly skilled geoscientists to deliver high quality pre-competitive data sets and advice across the mineral and energy sector. I believe that Bronwyn continues a line of exceptional people that have previously held this position. That made me say that. And finally, on our panel, very excited. Well, I'm excited about all the panelists, but there's something about this man, Cam McQuaig, Head of Geoscience Excellence in BHP. Cam is leading a global team of experts across all commodities who ensure thought leadership in geoscience is applied across the entire value chain. Cam was previously Director of the Centre for Exploration Targeting at UWA, University of Western Australia, and a Director of SRK Australia. Cam has a PhD from the University of Saskatchewan. He's a board member of Ozscope, an adjunct professor at the University of Western Australia, and a recipient of the Gibb Maitland Medal from the Geological Society of Australia for contributions to Western Australian geology and mineral exploration. What a great panel. We've heard about them. Great credentials. Now let's put it to them and hear some of their insights. So I have a series of questions that I'd like to ask to draw out each of the panelists, but we'll also go a bit free between some of that as well. But I'll start with you, Kim, and particularly with your policy lens. What do you see as some of the key impacts of the Exploring for the Future program, and why do you think it's worth government investing in pre-competitive geoscience?
Thanks, Steve. Lucky first. So, look, I think it's very clear that Exploring for the Future has had a really transformational impact. EFTF has established this kind of impressive pre-competitive geoscience standard, and I think that's really set quite a high bar for the following measure, which will be Resourcing Australia's Prosperity Initiative, the RAP initiative. You know, at its highest level, and we've heard about this morning, you've had EFTF deliver this more accurate, more detailed, holistic picture of Australia, its natural resource potential. And that's important for like a range of reasons, but at its highest sense, it's important because knowledge is power. So EFTF has provided this essential information and analysis, which has improved our knowledge about Australia's landmass and what's beneath its surface, or as we've kind of put out in more eloquent media releases, what's beneath our feet. We know what we're made of. And doing that means we can help government, industry and communities make well-informed and empowered decisions. And if we zoom into the resources sector, which is where I like to play as the Acting General Manager of Mining Branch, and in particular to exploration of mining activities, we can really see how pre-comp geoscience data provided by EFTF has played this instrumental role in the sector's success. And there's been 8,000 statistics thrown around this morning, so I'm not going to add to that, but I'm going to add some dollar figures because I'm always interested in the dollar figures. So one stat that really stands out to me is the economic impact arising from just 3 EFTF supported resources projects since 2016 is estimated between 446 million to more than 2.5 billion. That's big money, and it's a good investment considering we've got the RAP initiative coming up, which is 3.4 billion over 35 years. Imagine what the scaled return will be on that. So it's a good ROI. And I think if you just look today, we've got almost, just over 270 people online. And I think you can see from the slides that Steve, you put up, and Andrew, you put up as well, just how many people and different organisations have rallied around the EFTF initiative. And they'll rally around RAP too. When you're bringing together that many brilliant minds, it can only bring brilliant ideas and collaboration. It's really heartening to see. So look, I think if you turn to why government should invest in pre-comp geoscience, there's probably three things that come to my mind. So I'll do that rule of three piece that people do. And these are issues that to me require collective action. So that we as a nation can progress forward with continued prosperity. One, it provides a competitive advantage over our global competitors. Two, this is vital for the race to net zero. And three, this underpins our economic growth and the strength of our resources sector. And so if you look at competitive advantage, government's decision for RAP, 3.4 billion over 35 years. I know people keep saying it's because it's just so incredible. It's also a clear signal of the value that government thinks of this work. Publicly available and government-funded pre-comp geoscience is crucial to the success of our resources sector. It reduces the riskiness and the cost of exploring for resources, and that's important, particularly for greenfields exploration, where a lot of our frontier development is going to be at. You've got estimates of 3 successful discoveries for every 1,000 drilling attempts in greenfields. We need pre-comp geoscience there, helping to reduce the riskiness of that activity. It also increases the attractiveness of investing in Australia's resource sector, and it's a bit of a race, right? Our pre-comp geoscience gives us a competitive advantage. Private sector investment will be drawn to countries with the best pre-comp geoscience on offer. And this is, born out of the ETF kind of stat that we've heard today, where our share of global exploration expenditure has increased from 8% in 2015 to 22%. And there's no denying, going on to number two, the race to net zero, there is an international race underway. It's a good one because we're all trying to get to net zero. And that's underway between resource-rich countries. And we're all competing to export resource inputs needed to power the transition to net zero. To give you a bit of a sense of the task ahead of us globally and collectively to achieve net zero, you've got the IEA Global Critical Minerals Outlook 2024, which was released in May. It's a good read if anyone's not seen it. Demand for key critical minerals, copper, lithium, cobalt, nickel, graphite, rare earth elements, things that probably people really didn't talk a lot about 10 years ago. The demand is projected to triple between 2023 and 2030. Copper demand will increase by 50%. Lithium demand is going to increase 9-fold between 2023 and 2040. Anticipated mine supply from announced projects will meet 67% of copper and 64% of lithium, we think. So there's a gap. 800 billion US of investment in mining, including selected critical minerals and strategic materials, is required to get on track for a net zero scenario to 2040. We've got a big task ahead of us, and we've also got a really big opportunity for Australia. And this probably leads on to the third thing I talk about, which to me is economic growth, which is another reason why pre-comp investment is important. Programs like EFTF and RAP underpin our economic growth. So we know the resources sector is a key driver of Australia's economic prosperity. I'm not telling anyone anything they don't already know. You've got the resources sector accounting for about 17% of our gross domestic product, 14.3% without gas. Taxes from resource exploitation are a significant revenue stream. That's what helps keep ticking things over. BHP have run some very successful ads showing how, taxes help run the hospitals and the schools and everything else that we're talking about as well. The Australian economy really benefits from pre-comp geoscience. So 2023 Deloitte Access Economics report estimates Commonwealth and state and territory government pre-comp geoscience supported 3.5% of Australia's total GDP in 21-22 and 76 billion of value add. These are big numbers. And it also represents, I guess, for government, what could be seen as a dream return, a dream ROI. So in 2022, ASL Allen Consulting estimated, looking at some representative case studies, that GA's pre-comp geoscience delivers a significant return on investment, which is for every dollar the Commonwealth Government spends on pre-comp geoscience, an approximate $1,500 is generated in additional benefits to the economy. If only I could find the same sort of ROIs, in my private life, I'd be living high. For me, I think that's probably the three kind of key collective reasons or issues that we want to invest in pre-comp geoscience. Steve?
Thanks, Kim. There was a lot in there, and great to hear that policy perspective, because that really is a big part of the ecosystem and engine room of how these things work. I'm also very heartened by the fact that you must be talking about pre-competitive geoscience a lot, because you've streamlined it into pre-comp geoscience. I'm going to have to pick up on that. Does anyone else on the panel want to build on what Kim has really started us off on here? Does anyone listen? Bronwyn?
Yeah, thanks, Steve, and thanks, Kim. I'd like to sort of add in probably a little bit more of a granular scale down into the state government perspective. So obviously, and we've spoken about this already, that government's policy and strategy really is aimed at sustainably improving the quality of life for us all. I think at the end of the day, that's kind of what we're about. State governments support the mining industry because it generates royalty income and it creates jobs. And these help pay for education, health, a police force, and our energy and water supplies. But to do this, we need safe and sustainable industry creation and growth. So as we're all turning our minds to net zero solutions, mineral exploration and production is critical to meeting these targets. And I just wanted to sort of dive into a little bit, and we talked a bit about the junior explorers, and Richard Schoddy's sort of work has sort of shown that sort of 60 to 70% of all exploration projects in Australia are from juniors, and the discoveries are made by our junior explorers. And down at the state level, and I know you guys think about it at the federal level as well, that pre-competitive geoscience underpins their exploration endeavours. We know that understanding the geology in the mineral system is critical to discovery. However, our juniors have much smaller budgets compared to our large mining companies. This ongoing funding is a huge issue for them, and ideally exploration takes place counter-cyclic to commodity price. However, they can't get funding unless the price is high. So we're always kind of a little bit out of sync. So this is where pre-competitive geoscience comes to play. When we can go into areas that are greenfields areas or areas that we already know, but where there's gaps in the data. This is where, we work really closely with GA, and GA have done a great job through the EFTF of doing this work. Working at a regional scale provides free data to these juniors that can underpin their exploration efforts, and their government support through that can actually get them some investment into their projects, which always leads to more discoveries. So supporting those junior and mid-sized explorers is critical in this ecosystem. So really, I just wanted to add that, and also that we know that pre-competitive geoscience underpins all of our strategic initiatives and our projects across the country. And the geological surveys work closely with GA, but also within the states and the territories. We're here to provide high quality evidence-based assessment and advisory services to our policy and strategy teams. And we can deliver even greater value to the states and territories by helping to diversify these industries, our industries, providing jobs and economic security. So I just wanted to add that in, Steve. Hopefully that's helpful.
Bronwyn, I'm really conscious that we've also got Cam from industry, and it'd be great to hear a little bit of industry perspective. And so Cam, in your opinion, what have been some of the most valuable outputs from the program that you've seen?
Well, I think the number one is the data, but why do I think it's been successful? I think because we actually had a strong problem statement at the beginning. Because, I mean, you can go out and collect all types of data, right? But if you think back to 2010, when under the auspices of the Australian Academy of Science, a number of groups like industry, academia, and government were brought together to address the challenge of how do we unlock Australia's potential. And that ended up in the federally endorsed Uncover document in 2012. And that has really informed state and federal surveys in what are the data, like what are the challenges, and therefore then what's the knowledge I need for that, and therefore what's the data I need to get the knowledge, right? So having things in a mineral systems framework has really allowed us to get the right data. And to me, the biggest contributions now and into the future are the fact that we're looking across the scale of the whole lithosphere. Right? So, you know, when you surveys start from geological mapping, and then they're delivering some geochemistry, and then the revolution of geochronology, and then now starting to get these deep sensing data sets from like the MT arrays, the passive seismic arrays. These are allowing us to understand the whole system much better, and to narrow down the search space, because the number one thing is where to go. Land access becomes more difficult. So undercover exploration is riskier, it's harder, right? So deciding where to go is critical. Getting into the right space to begin with, because you're going to invest a lot more people, time, and money trying to find something. So that, I think that's the fact that it's all been in that strong problem statement is why the data sets have been so valuable.
Yeah, great point. And you know what I love about it too is that even a large company like BHP, you're still talking about some fundamentals there that are really universally applicable. So that's great. And Cam, you know, you work all around the world with BHP. We've been talking about, you know, I think Richard Blewett bestowed gold medals upon the country in the Olympic spirit for its pre-comp geoscience. But you know, what's your perspective on where we really stand? You know, give us that bit of insight, please, Cam.
Yeah, well, it's Australia definitely is world leading. And why is that? Because there's other nations that have very strong surveys, very strong geoscience, you know, in Canada, in Scandinavia, the US, a number of places. So, and to me, the thing that puts Australia ahead from an industry perspective is that there's always been, I've always seen a much stronger link between government, industry, and academia in Australia than I have in other places, including my home country of Canada, right? So, and I've got a number of ideas of why that might be, but I think that's a real driver to why Australia is a leader, is that the state and federal surveys have a strong focus on voice of the customer. You know, what's the knowledge that our stakeholders need, and therefore what do we go get? Again, back to the problem statements. I think people that work largely in Australia may not get to see that perspective outside Australia. And I know we always bemoan the fact that we don't work well enough together and stuff like that within the country. But the reality is we do pretty well. And there's a lot of mechanisms at the federal and state levels to encourage that, co-funding initiatives, et cetera. So, so I think, yes, Australia is world leading. And I think the reason is that they share a common purpose across the different institutions at some level, and that helps drive collaboration and getting the right knowledge and information.
That was great. A question for all of our panelists, and I'm pretty keen to get Shane involved in some of this as well. It's fantastic sunset you've got there, Shane, with the windmills or wind farms. But I want to try and draw all of you guys out. But the question for all of our panelists is, thinking about the legacy of the program and the new funding for the RAP program for the next 35 years, what are some of the future challenges that pre-competitive geoscience can most assist with, and where are the greatest opportunities? And I might start with Shane on that, if you're happy, Shane, but I will also be looking to tap in with you, Andrew, because you talked a bit about this in your presentation.
Thanks, Stephen. I might just jump off some of the comments that both Kim, Brom, and also Cam have made. So Kim spoke a little bit about what we're trying to do to get to net zero in that sort of global race. And Australia is pretty well placed in that space. But in my sort of role, we're looking at three particular initiatives that are pushing into a newer economy than what you guys would currently be operating in. So heard some really good remarks this morning about the success of the previous program. I'll go through the three opportunities here, but there's some real strengths with that kind of program pushing into a new economy. So carbon capture and storage is one. It's an obvious one. It's the next thing that we need to do to continue oil and gas, to decarbonise the heavy industry. It plays to that traditional strengths around pre-competitive activity that sort of Kim and others went through, de-risks. The slightly different frame I'd like to look at that one through is having data from trusted government sources in this space is critically important, right? So really investing in the capability of our institutions, being able to point to the accuracy of the statements that companies make. We see this, and Andrew and I talk about it occasionally around NCCS. It means all things to all people, but also it can be frightening to some others, and misinformation and disinformation in any of these spaces is rife. So having a really credible partner in GA to gather that data, to present it in a way that Andrew spoke about earlier, is really critically important. Moving from the more traditional into the emerging, Andrew spoke a little bit about hydrogen. So it's no secret that the government's backing hydrogen very strongly as a future pathway to decarbonise both our energy sector but also our heavy industry. It presents a pretty big export opportunity. Hydrogen will need, and one of the things that we work through in our hydrogen strategy, which we'll release shortly, we will need geological storage. So similar to the salt caverns that you see in the US Strategic Petroleum Reserve, what is the new Strategic Petroleum Reserve, the Strategic Hydrogen Reserve for Australia? So there's a real opportunity here to use that pre-competitive work to go out and find those storages, to map those out, to de-risk them, to work out how that can link in with the economy of the future. Some of the ones that my team are talking to me about is sort of the Chandler Formation, the Mulliwa Salt Unit, the Polder Formation in South Australia. There's many more. But if we're going to have a big hydrogen sector, we're going to need these things to be at the right place, at the right location, linking up with things. So really remarkable opportunities in the hydrogen sector for storage to really build that economy going forward, so that where we're producing more than what we need in summer, store it, export it later on, take the hacksaw out of the production. The final one that I'll just talk to, Steve, which is new, it hit all the marks that Kim spoke about. There's uncertainty, there's risk, there's investor uncertainty, there's offshore wind. So we're rolling out 6 areas around Australia now, and we're a bit behind, right? So if we had this additional funding to push into these new sectors, we would have gone out and de-risked some of those geological, like some of the geotech you want to do offshore before we got to it. Minister Bowen's in a bit of a rush, so we need to get that done sooner rather than later so we can get to net zero by 2050. But there is a real opportunity here to start to get out there and to de-risk some of those areas, to look at what the next areas might be, to de-risk some of the areas we've got now. Importantly, also, a bit of a tip of the hat to Geoscience Australia here, really leveraging some of that capability you've got in data storage, data standards, making sure that we can share that information broadly, again, to target that sort of mis and disinformation that we get in some of these sectors, so that really leveraging the valuable and incredible institutions that we've got like GA.
No, that's great, Shane. Thank you. Andrew, did you want to add to that? I'm picking on you because you did talk about some of this in your presentation. But
Yeah, I did. Thanks, Steve. I mean, I agree with everything that Shane said. I think those emerging areas are really, really important ones to get after, as the vernacular is at the moment. And of course, as part of the new program, we're going there. I just wanted to touch base or go back to something that Cam said earlier about the, which I think is an opportunity that we can definitely build on, around the importance of the alignment between different parts of the. I'll talk from a science perspective, science ecosystem, and in this sort of supporting our industry sectors. I think there's a lot of goodwill too. There's a great problem statement, which is really important, as you've alluded to. That problem statement is still valid today as it was, back in 2010 or whenever it was. And so, but it's also the goodwill amongst us all to do what we can to get the best research and best data and information together to make the best decisions. So certainly in the government sphere, there is certainly a lot of goodwill between the surveys, and I know that goodwill also extends to our academic colleagues and also many of our industry colleagues that we work with. I think in terms of, in that sort of context, I think there are certainly great opportunities, and Richard Blewett actually alluded to it in his question around bringing all that knowledge and information and data and experience together to provide an integrated understanding of what the resource potential is. I don't see too many other countries doing that. I don't see too many other, science areas doing that. But given that the geology can be the container for the things that we're looking for, to for want of a better phrase, I think the integrated component to that, bringing all of that information together at the one place to give you that holistic understanding, is a really powerful opportunity for us that we need to get after. And it's really about, in the context of those new emerging areas that Shane talked about. We haven't really thought about that too much, but we will do, and we need to. And I think that's one of the legacies of EFTF. We started on that pathway, and we've done some fantastic things in certain areas. As I said, the Tyser, Mount Isa to Tennant Creek to Mount Isa region was one of those areas. But as a model of going forward, I think that's a really one we could really chase for a variety of applications. So I think that's one of the greatest opportunities that we can really go after.
Yeah, terrific. Excellent. There is a topic that I want to bring up into the discussion here that has been important all along, but I can't help but feel it's going to become even more important, and that's something that many of us are very passionate about as well, and that's working with and learning from, and the two-way exchange with First Nations people. We talk about the knowledge, the original mappers, explorers and miners in the country. And, it'd be great to hear a little bit about, where we're at and where we can go to. And particularly, government has an important role there. And I might look to head to Bron first on this, because at that state level, there's a lot of direct involvement there. What are some of the things that we can do to really take that forward and help with it?
That's great. Thanks, Steve. Look, we've been pretty active here in this state, and I think we've got some really good opportunities to sort of share what we've learnt and how we're going forward in this space. So our recent Gawler Phase 2 project, which has been over the last 2 or 3 years here in this state, a different approach was made, and that's a next generation mineral systems mapping project for people that don't know about that. It was a great example where we worked with the people on the land and our First Nations people. We had 3 different Aboriginal groups that we were working with, which sort of adds a lot of complexity into making sure that everybody understands what we're trying to do and bringing those groups together. So obviously, this is an obvious statement, but it is one needs to be said, and that is engaging early is the key. So building those ongoing relationships with all the groups that are active in that area, and even sometimes that are not active in that area, but contribute to the knowledge around the state itself. But really, what we did was send out a lot of people, lots of different times. Invited the groups to come to Adelaide as well and speak to us in the city as well. We talked about what we were going to do on land and the techniques that were going to be used. So in this instance, it was MT and some gravity. So we showed them the tools, we showed them how it worked and what needed to be done on land to get the good information that we needed to go forward. And as I said, we did invite the groups up to the core library as well and had sessions in the core library. We took out core from holes that were drilled on their land and showed them in vertical sense what the rocks looked like deep under the ground. We brought up the INSARIG as our database, and we brought up all the layers for the area and showed them all the different geophysical layers, starting from the ground level where they were very familiar, diving deeper and deeper into the land, and then combining that with that core information was really, really exciting. The relationship really solidified and got really, just took it to that next level. So that we also had some videos that GA had actually produced, and they were really, really helpful in showing the different techniques and what was going to go on land. So introducing videos, online talks, going out on land with them, bringing them into the city to show them the data and the core from the core library was really, really, it worked really well and built those really strong relationships with the Aboriginal groups there. It built a lot of trust up between the two groups, and we're continuing on with that work now, just going out and visiting the groups even when we're not asking for anything. You know, it's just going out, letting them know, hey, we're still here. Sending out familiar faces too is actually really important. And I know people change around a little bit, but always having somebody that they've seen before is good. It builds trust and it helps with those relationships. So we're really building on that going forward, and with our new MINEX project, the National Drilling Initiatives, we're going down the same path and working really strongly with Aboriginal people on the lands. So at the end of the project, though, it wasn't just, oh, thanks very much, we're done now, we've got it all. What we did was invited them to come back to our end of project workshop. Unfortunately, they didn't come, but the invitation was there, and we actually asked them if they would like to speak as well about their experience about the whole project as well. So doing that, you know, sort of coming back, that loop, bringing them back at the end, showing them the data, showing them what we actually achieved and what we're going to use it for. Build a lot of relationship and a lot of trust with the groups. So yeah, I think that was sort of where we're sitting when we're going out to do this pre-competitive geoscience acquisition programs.
Yeah, that's great. Gee, there were a lot of good things in there, Bron, and you know, I love the elevated level of respect, engagement that we're seeing there. I think is really important. Thanks for mentioning those explanatory videos that were produced actually as part of EFTF, the very simple animations that explain techniques, and they have that ability to bring in different languages, including First Nations languages, to consistently explain the work that we need to do on country. So yeah, if people aren't aware of them, they're available on YouTube as well. Does anyone else want to add to that point around First Nations and First Nations engagement?
Thanks, Steve. One thing I've noticed over the time of the Exploring for the Future program has really been the more that we engage with First Nations Australians, the more they want to know and the more they want to be involved. And so we need to utilise that engagement and that enthusiasm. And so we definitely will be building on what we're doing already in that space, and really developing some co-designed projects to go forward, to really, you know, embed them and embed First Nations Australians' thoughts and information into our programs. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, join the journey. Kim, you've got your hand up as well. Got a point there?
Yeah, look, I'd just add as well, and I definitely second everything that Bronwyn said and Andrew said as well. I guess sometimes it's hard to remember how far we've grown in how we talk about this, and cultural competency is something that is a journey and it doesn't end. And so you're always kind of growing and learning and evolving and changing what you do. And so when I look at the wonderful opportunity that sits before us with RAP and the wonderful opportunity we've had with EFTF, and then the work that states and territories are doing, I guess what I see is this underpinning movement towards this concept of First Nations economic self-determination. And part of this is you even just pick it up in the subtlety of language. When we speak about doing projects in this area now, we speak about doing it with traditional owners and with Aboriginal groups, not to or for, but with. And I think that subtlety in language is a really important distinguishment to raise here, because it just shows how far these sorts of initiatives and programs have grown in such a short period of time, and then how much greater success you have as a result.
Good point. Actually, the other word, at, doing engagement at First Nations is the other one to have moved on from. That's terrific. Kim, actually, while we've got you warmed up, don't relax too much. I want to ask a follow-up question to you about, you've given us some insight and feeling about, the recognition of the value of pre-comp geoscience, as you call it. One thing I'm really interested in, and I think it would be a great one to share if you could just briefly explain, how does that pre-competitive geoscience data really contribute to the government setting its priorities for the resources sector? I mean, you obviously love the value of it and how it can be used by industry and so forth, but how do you and your teams use that to set the government priorities?
Yeah, so, I mean, you're lucky I call it pre-comp geoscience. I haven't given it some crazy acronym that no one understands what it is. So I guess there's probably two key areas to my mind where pre-comp geoscience helps government kind of shape and drive its priorities. One we've spoken about quite considerably, and Shane can definitely speak to this as well, which is meeting our net zero ambitions. The other is this thing called Future Made in Australia, which is everywhere at the moment. If you're reading any media whatsoever or hearing from our various ministers, and so you've kind of got this idea where Future Made in Australia looks to identify where previously we have been maybe digging things out of the ground and sending them off without any value add to those resources, any enrichment, processing, whatever it might be. Is there an opportunity now in Australia for us to hold and go through a few more stages of the supply chain to have a bit more value add to those resources and a bit more surety on our supply chains? And I think that's one of the most important pieces for us at the moment, is really starting to conceptualise that, of which EFTF and RAP, providing that pre-competitive geoscience, is hugely important, because what sits off that umbrella term of Future Made in Australia are things like the critical minerals strategy, the national battery strategy, what will eventually be a green metal strategy but is currently in consultation. You've just got all of these kind of different strategies and plans, which are, and I think this is a good thing, very happily ambitious to go, we've got to get on board and get this done. And we've got to take this opportunity while it's ahead of us, and while we can in this race. And so that kind of idea of Future Made in Australia, to me, is the primary area where we're going to be able to use this pre-competitive geoscience to really stand up a lot of things that we need to stand up now. We often say, well, the road to net zero runs through Australia's resources sector. A lot of the things sitting around Future Made in Australia are all about also achieving that collective objective of net zero. That's only 26 years away. It's no longer a 50-year journey. It's not an 80-year journey. We're not talking about 2100. It's 26 years. And in the mining world and the exploration world, that's not that long. So, we've got these grand ambitions being set, which you have to, it's one of those shoot for the moon, land amongst the stars, probably style objectives that we've got collectively now as a nation with these policies. Pre-competitive geoscience, there's probably no mistake that we've got a 35-year program, nicely goes for a little bit longer than 26 years, so that we've got that underpinning foundation now to be able to drive through and get these policies done and achieved. So hopefully that wasn't too roundabout an answer. Sorry, policy people can sometimes be a little grandiose and circular with how they talk about things.
No, that was great, Kim. That was understandable and really on the money. So thank you very much. Look, I think I might go to you again, Shane, and try and draw out from you a little bit about are there particular initiatives in the Department of Climate Change, Energy, the Environment and Water that are focused on that will have assistance, particularly with sustainable management of Australia's natural resources?
That's a good one. But before I get to that one, Steve, I'm just going to take the mic and just go back to the First Nations conversation a little bit and just throw out the challenge to everybody in the session today to push beyond First Nations engagement into using these new projects that we get up through these kinds of programs to really push into the benefit sharing space with First Nations groups. So as Kim mentioned before, we're growing as a people, we're learning as we go. It's a bit of a journey. Ultimately, the journey needs to be to make sure that the new economy has a real place at the table for First Nations groups. Oftentimes they're left behind. I want to make sure that I throw that challenge out to people to look beyond just the paradigm of engagement around a development, but what's the benefit sharing? How do I really bring and lift up and close the gap with First Nations groups? So with that one, I'll move on to the next piece. I suppose for us in DQ here, it's not in the area where I sit, but one of the big things that our environment colleagues are grappling on is really trying to shorten up that approval timeframe. So maybe a lot of the people, I don't see who's in the 256, 255, they're dropping as I speak, so I better sharpen up a little bit. A lot of those will be concerned about the regulatory pathways in Australia, and they're challenging. So anything that we can do to get better certainty around the projects, the project impacts, the project benefits, get those early, get those done before you get into the approvals pipeline is a real benefit. So a lot of the things we're focusing on here in DQ is what are the priority projects that we need to get through the pipeline faster? What can we do to the approvals process to make it, everybody says streamline, but the reality is you want to take out the bits that are inefficient. Sometimes, and I've worked in that space previously, a lot of that is around uncertainty around data. So the assessment officers get information, they're not sure of the veracity of it, doesn't quite hit the mark properly. So whatever we can do in this space to give greater certainty to regulators can really move those approvals timelines down and really capture that opportunity that Kim was talking about. There's only 26 years, so we don't have a lot of time to get a lot of these projects up and running, particularly in the critical minerals and hydrogen space. So where we can give regulators greater certainty, where we've got credible authorities out there co-designing programs with people, that really shortens up that time frame, provides more certainty to regulators, quicker environmental approvals, and we can really capture the benefit for the transition then.
Yeah, excellent. And Cam, what about you at industry level? What are some of the real key things that you look for with pre-competitive geoscience and how you're then going to use it?
One of the key aspects of dealing with large amounts of data, so we've evolved from struggling to get a few data points to now having fire hoses of data that can come at us and trying to drink from the hose. So one of the challenges that we're tackling and that industry as a whole is tackling is how do you enable better human data interaction? How do you enable, and I mean, this is about harnessing aspects of AI, right? Understanding its pitfalls at the same time, right? And making data fair, right? The findable, accessible, interoperable, reusable, and fair isn't about humans finding data as much as allowing the machines. A colleague in Osco, Leslie Arnold, says it's about not opening the data cupboard, but letting the machine come into the back of the cupboard, right? Find the data for you. So I think that's a real challenge, and I think that's something I'd like to see RAP consider is how do we actually enable better human data interaction? And in the products, although I think it's a great initiative to be providing synthesis products for industry, we need to be learning from that, right? Like, so as we build these products, we know there's uncertainties and assumptions that have wide ranges. We should be constantly learning. Here's the existing gaps. How do we close them? What's the next data set? And I think as an industry rep, that's what I'd like to see the government surveys doing, as well as that strong, like I say, that and you get that with the collaborative attitude and always focusing on voice of customer, right? So.
Yeah, no, that's a really interesting point you make there, Cam, about the synthesized, interpreted type processed information, and then the value of the raw data. And you touched on that, and I think that's been a real issue for a lot of government surveys to try and work out. They've almost been trying to go through is it one or the other? And what we're actually now finding more and more is that, of course, it's diverse, and we need to be providing both. Bronwyn, are you seeing similar sorts of discussion points coming up at state government level, and how then, whether you do or whether you don't, how does that then interact with what's happening at the federal government level with what's happening at the state government level?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Look, definitely, we're always thinking about how we can bring our quality data together with the insights, the geological insights, and those synthesized products that you're talking about here in South Australia for sure. Like a number of the initiatives that our government in the state is working towards in the sustainability of our resources is, and these projects sort of are underpinned and sit alongside of our pre-competitive data. And that would be our Northern Water Project. So we have a number of copper deposits going up to Olympic Dam, all the way along the coast, and there's a lot of graphite and copper, uranium, a lot of other critical minerals as well in that, magnetite, of course, which is the one I need to mention, in this corridor. And this being the driest state and the driest continent, we really do need water. So that project there is an enabler, but it's driven by the need for resources. So, you can see that the pre-competitive geoscience that the EFTF have provided and what we do within the states and synthesize back and give that advice really drives some of these big initiatives that can really reindustrialize our state, but also open up some of these deposits that just need that a bit of extra infrastructure to get them over the line. The other one I think is been mentioned already, but that our government is very hot on at the moment is we know. Look, I've heard numbers somewhere between 7 and 13% of steel making. There's no way that we can get to net zero without decarbonising our steel making, and we've got a big initiative here too, because we've got the hydrogen jobs plan. So there's a big hydrogen project going in that we're using our renewable, our sort of overproduction of renewable energy in this state to feed into hydrogen jobs plan that then feeds into a green steel strategy, and that is about creating steel using our magnetite resources. So whilst these big strategies, they're big statewide strategies that are sort of underpin reindustrialization of an area, but it all comes back down to the pre-competitive geoscience and the advice that we're able to feed into these strategies. So I just wanted to add that part in for sitting at that state level. That's kind of where we're working there.
Yeah, terrific. Thanks, Bron. So I'm going to wrap it up in we've got about 10 minutes left, and I want to actually wrap it up with an opportunity for each of you to share with us something that you would love to see change or produced or made different in the next, let's go for 10 years. Let's say a 10-year time frame. Look into your sort of internal crystal ball in your head and think about what is it that you're most most excited about, perhaps if only we could see this in 10 years' time. I might start with, I'm going to start with Cam.
Well, from the perspective of
wish.
Yeah, my wish list. I mean, well, ideally, if you look at it from the position of Australian pre-competitive data, I mean, ideally what we'd want to see is within 10 years, the potential for the emergence of a new mineral district, right? Like a world-class mineral district. And I think a lot of the data sets that have been collected, and then now will continue to be collected and expanded through RAP, will do that if we keep a focus on that, the two things I said before, which is allowing the human data interaction and the focusing on the gaps that are left in understanding the mineral system, right? And a lot of them is how we map processes a bit deeper in the earth. And so, the alliance between the state and federal surveys, academia, and industry to drive our knowledge there, geodynamics, fertility of regions deep in the earth. But 10 years from now, I think there is the real potential in Australia to have, to see that new mineral districts, whole new mineral districts are emerging. A lot of them will be centrally in Australia, and then that brings in the aspect of understanding the water resources at the same time. And so there's a lot of pieces of the puzzle that have to come together to open those up. And I think just one more comment is that, I like, Kim's aspirational downstream value add aspect and Bronwyn's aspect of the green steel. But one thing to remember is that at the end of the day, when you're in a globally competitive market, right? They who have the best resources win, right? And it always comes down to the quality of the resource base. Undoubtedly, there are high quality resources left in Australia to find, given that, as Andrew pointed out, some people say between 70 and 80%, of the continent really is covered and effectively blind to past exploration efforts. So I'd love to see some of those high quality districts emerging in 10 years.
That's a beauty. So 6 minutes left. Let's now go to Bronwyn. Obviously Bronwyn, you're going to have that high quality district that Cam talks about in South Australia. What does your 10-year dream / vision
So
look like?
I'm going to come at this from a slightly different angle, because I know there's going to be a lot of different opinions here. But coming out of an oil and gas industry, it doesn't take very long for the communities to turn against you. Okay, so what I'd love to see in 10 years is a pride developed in all Australians regarding our resource richness. So through the RAP, through the EFTF and through the RAP and through the other endeavours from the states and territories, working together with academia, with industry, that we all end up being able to communicate, to be able to back up what we say we will do on land, be sustainable, we're clean, we're safe, so that we can build trust with our communities. And that at the end of that 10 years, or even as we're going along, that everyone understands that the mining industry, the minerals industry, is paramount to achieving net zero. We can't do it without the minerals industry, and turning their heads away from this industry, saying we're dirty or whatever, is not productive for us. We need to be able to reach in and use this information and really reach into our communities and get them to understand that they're partners in this. We're not just a dig and ship culture anymore. We're going to be diversifying. We're going to go to net zero. We're going to bring them into the mix, and we're all going to partner in this new way of working into the future. So develop trust with our communities and improve the quality of life for Australia and globally. That's what I'd like to see.
Good one, Brian. You got the big thumbs up from Big Cam there too, so that's great. Let's go to you now, Shane. 10 years. What's it going to be like?
Well, I mean, Cam stole my thunder there because we're actually working on the things that Cam is looking at for his 10 years. So if I am successful in my role in 10 years' time, we should have what Cam was after. So we're trying to put the building blocks in place for place-based solutions, right? So offshore wind or renewable projects connecting into hydrogen, which is then decarbonising our iron, our alumina, those sort of, and they're adding value for a new export product for a new economy. So in 10 years, maybe it's not all in place. Maybe we've just got the hydrogen hubs built out, some good electrolyzers. The South Australian nation leading jobs plan is starting to bear fruit. And then where people are seeing that, and then you get that national pride. We have a new industry on top of an existing industry base. So that would be a really good achievement in 10 years. So I'm stealing some of it back from Cam, but we've both got the same vision.
It's great. It's not stealing. It's building and joining together. Good on you, Shane.
Aligning.
Kim.
Actually really hard to be one of the last people going without going, well, all of the above. So yes to the integration, yes to the pride. It is something that I really do notice a difference in how people talk about minerals extraction and use and mining, particularly if you go to the west coast of Australia versus the east coast, it is strikingly different. So I would love to see that change. My big thing, which kind of centres around this too, is I would just really like to see the average exploration time come down. So we're sitting at an average of 17 years at the moment. If that could come down and we could be exploring, discovering and getting on with extraction quicker, I would be very happy. And that is a very, very typical policy response, which is ignore all of the practical pieces of that because we've got such a tight time frame to meet. So I'd like to see exploration average timeframes come down.
Wow. Yeah. It implies there's a bit of catching up to do too on some of this. So that's an interesting one because normally we think about the sort of ongoing chain of projects coming on. So yeah, there's a little bit of urgency in that, Kim. I'm going to read a bit in there. Now, Kim talked about the pressures of being second last. Andrew, I know there's pressure here, but I want to give you the opportunity to really give us some last words on this. 10 years. What's the dream? What's the ideal?
Well, the key dream, the key KPI for me is to deliver the 10-year roadmap that the minister announced that we were going to do after 10 years. But my take on it is similar to what Bron was talking about. We have a real opportunity at the moment to inspire the next generation of geoscientists, and I've got a young family, and that they don't think that the mineral sector or the resources sector is really for them. But then I tell them, you can change the world. You can actually be part of the future, that a new future. We talk about new economy. We talk about the new place we're going to be living in. Well, you can be a key agent in designing that through what we do here. You can either take it as science, you can do it as a technology thing, or you can do it. There's a whole range of professions that will go through to do this, but we're all about one goal. And I think in 10 years' time, I would like to have a conversation with my family that say, actually, this is a really good thing to do and really important for the nation. And I would hope that all families could have that conversation.
What a great way to finish. Fantastic. And I've loved it. To hear from the panelists and really have that vision, but it's also just the hope and vision for and the ideal of where we can go and take this, I think is really, I think that's the bit that really excites me from what we've heard today. I think we'll look to wrap up there. I know that people are thinking about lunch and all those sorts of things. So thank you for firstly the audience for taking the time to join us for the first session of the Exploring for the Future showcase. I'd really like to make sure the panelists are aware of just how insightful and thoughtful their inputs have been today and how well they've all worked together. It's been a pleasure for me to work with great people there. Just a little bit looking ahead today, I know we're thinking about 10 years, but just what happens after lunch. The next session commences at 2:30 p.m. Australian Eastern Standard Time. And the session is titled Geoscience for All Australians, and it will share many of the ways the Exploring for the Future program has engaged with stakeholders, including First Nations and regional communities, improving the way we make our data and insights accessible to everyone. And so I encourage you all to join us then as we share more of the detailed new science, insights, and releases. Look forward to that. Thank you, everybody. See you soon.